everyone, and welcome to the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wondered about music. So whether you're a music lover or just interested in the science of sound, you're in the right place. Now, have you ever heard a song so vividly that it felt like you could see it? Like the melody almost painted shapes behind your eyes, or the chords colored the space around you. Well, for some people, this isn't a metaphor. It's actually everyday life. Today, we're diving into the surreal and absolutely beautiful world of synesthesia, a neurological phenomenon where the senses merge and music becomes a multisensory experience. It's actually one of the conditions that got me fascinated with music psych in the first place when I read about it in Oliver Sacks' book Musicophilia. And today, we're actually going to be hearing directly from some of you about your experiences. So ahead of recording, I asked listeners to share their own experiences with synesthesia, and I got some incredible answers, as always. So you'll be hearing directly from other listeners, like guest voices, as we piece together what it actually feels like to live with a mind that translates sound into sight, movement, and feeling. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm super excited for this one. Okay, so to start off with, close your eyes and imagine a violin playing a high note. Now, what colour comes to mind? For some people, this process, it isn't just imagination. It's actually involuntary. When they hear a violin, they might see gold. And when they listen to jazz, the saxophone might ripple in waves of purple. That's synesthesia. Well, technically just one type of it. So synesthesia is a neurological trait in which the stimulation of one sense automatically and involuntarily triggers another sense. The word itself comes from the Greek syn, which means together, and aesthesis, which means sensation. It literally means joined perception. So in everyday terms, synesthesia is when two or more senses are cross-wired. But unlike hallucinations, which are disconnected from reality, synesthesia is consistent, stable, and often deeply meaningful to the person experiencing it. It's not something imagined or made up. It's how the brain really processes sensory information. And these cross-connections actually aren't random. They're consistent from person to person over time. So, for example, if a synesthete first experiences the note F sharp as blue, it will likely always be blue throughout their life. So, like I said, colour is actually just one type of synesthesia. There's actually over 60 known types of synesthesia, which is crazy, but for this episode, let's zoom in on the types that relate directly to music, because these are among the most vivid and emotionally rich. So here are some of the most common forms of music-related synesthesia. First, we have chromesthesia, which is actually the most studied type of synesthesia involving music. So people with chromesthesia, they see colours, shapes, or flashes of light when they hear sounds, especially musical sounds. So a trumpet might look like a yellow triangle, or a cello might appear in deep blue. Some people see the colour overlaid in front of them like a projection, and others see it in almost like their mind's eye. And what's fascinating is that it's often triggered not just by pitch, but also by timbre, which is the quality or texture of sound. So the same note on a flute and a violin might produce totally different colours. But like I said, colour associations, they tend to be consistent within an individual, but they vary between people. So one person's C major might be red, but another person's might be green. And then we have timbre shape synesthesia. Some people perceive sound qualities like harshness, softness, or distortion as geometric shapes or even textures. And these synesthetic associations often resemble visual metaphors that we all use. So think about when we say sharp sound or soft tone. But for synesthetes, the perception is immediate and involuntary. Then there's spatial sequence synesthesia or pitch space synesthesia, and this involves mapping musical notes or scales onto spatial dimensions, like imagining low pitches to the left and high notes to the right, or visualizing a melody as almost moving along a staircase. It's closely related to what's called spatial musical imagery, and some researchers argue that it enhances musical memory and pitch perception. Think of it like an internal map of music. And lastly, we have sound taste or sound touch synesthesia. Now, I actually touched on this in episode 17 that I did on music and taste perception. It's much rarer, but it's remarkable, really. Some people report that certain sounds produce a taste or physical sensation in the body. A piano note might taste like lemon. A drum beat might cause a tingling feeling on the neck or hands. These forms are definitely less common, but they offer such powerful insight into the emotional embodiment of music. Now, I actually have one listener who shares what it's like to literally taste music and associating different tastes with different artists' music, which is just absolutely fascinating to me. So I'm going to let her talk about that and explain in her own words.
Hello, my name's Carla from Birmingham, and I experience synesthesia where certain people's voices remind me of different food. I didn't think this was synesthesia, and then I went to an event at the Flatpack Film Festival in Birmingham called Seeing Music, Hearing Colour, all about synesthesia. And there's a psychologist who I did speak to afterwards, and she said it is synesthesia, because I can't actually taste the people's voices, but it's an associative type. The first time I recall having it was when I was a child in the 1980s, and Madge from Neighbours was the sound of the skin on the hot chocolate when it's cooling. And then the next time I noticed it was in the 90s with Damon Albarn from Blur, his voice sounding like chicken. So other examples of singers are Cher is a very strong cheddar. Noddy Holder and John Lennon have got very bacon-like voices. Griff Rhys from Super Furry Animals, it's Weetabix. And then Britney Spears and Gwen Stefani, they both sound like chicken nuggets dipped in barbecue sauce. There's probably quite a lot more, but none spring to mind. And also, it's not with every single person's voice. So sometimes when people find out I have this, they say, "Oh, what's my voice?" And I'm always a little bit apologetic if I don't have something for someone. But yeah, it's voices speaking, but yeah, it is also singers. So like the ones I've mentioned. But I do very, very occasionally have music as colours or shapes. So the band Dutch Uncles from Manchester, their music is very pastel colour for me. And I wonder if it's something to do with sort of thinking of the patterns of artwork from different times, and if the music reminds me of that, then I'll associate it. So it is associative, really. It doesn't really impact which music I listen to, although I do love music, but it does make me hungry. So I suppose it impacts my life sometimes. Like I had a lecture at university once, and the lecturer's voice was like chocolate digestives with caramel in, and I had to go and then buy a packet of those and eat them because I was craving them so much. I mean, I think it's a lovely thing to have. I don't mind it at all. But yeah, I guess it does work with people singing.
Isn't that just absolutely fascinating? I think it's such a incredible way to be able to experience the world, and it also just highlights that you might not even realize that it's something that not everyone else experiences and it's unique to you. It's just absolutely fascinating. So synesthesia actually usually develops in early childhood, right around the time that we start learning to label the world. A child might casually mention that Tuesday is light blue and rectangular, or the number 5 feels fuzzy and red. They're not actually being imaginative, they're being honest, because for them, that's just the truth of how the world works. And especially as a child, you don't realize that maybe not everyone around you is experiencing the world that way. And as it turns out, there may actually be a reason that it starts so early. Some neuroscientists, like Dr. Vilayano Ramachandran, believe that all of us may be born with synesthetic tendencies, that the infant brain is, in his words, a kind of neural kaleidoscope, a place where the senses are still overlapping and mingling, not yet separated into different categories like sight, sound, touch, or taste. In the early stages of development, the brain is wildly interconnected. The auditory cortex talks to the visual cortex. The area for color perception is chatting with the region for numbers. Everything is lighting up all at once. Ramachandran suggests that as we grow, most of us undergo a process called synaptic pruning, and this is where the brain trims away these excess neural connections in the name of efficiency. But for people with synesthesia, some of those cross-sensory pathways stay open. It's not a malfunction, it's simply a different style of wiring, a more vivid architecture of perception. Ramachandran even proposes that synesthesia might offer a window into how metaphor and creativity emerge in the brain. If you think about it, we all use cross-sensory language all the time. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe a sharp sound, a bitter truth, a warm color. But synesthetes, they experience this literally. For them, it's not just poetic, it's perceptual. Synesthesia is actually often genetic. It tends to run in families, though not always in identical forms. One person might see colors when they hear music, while a sibling might associate numbers with textures. Studies have found that synesthetes often cluster within families, and while no single synesthesia gene has been identified, there's mounting evidence that it's a polygenetic trait, influenced by multiple genes and possibly shaped by early environment as well. And here's the thing, synesthesia isn't as rare as we think it is. For a long time, it was seen as an oddity, something pathological or super unusual. But in more recent large-scale studies, it's suggested that around 4% of the population has some form of synesthesia. That's roughly 1 in 25 people, which, when you think about it, it's not rare at all. In certain communities, like musicians or artists, the number may be significantly higher. But why musicians in particular? Well, for someone whose experience of sound includes color, texture, movement, or shape, music becomes a whole body event. Not just something you hear, but something you feel and see and, like we've experienced, sometimes even taste. Music is inherently abstract. It's not about literal meaning. It's about sensation, emotion, rhythm, and pattern. So for synesthetes, music might be the closest external reflection of their internal world, and naturally they gravitate towards it. Synesthesia is also more frequently reported by women and slightly more common in left-handed people, although the gender difference might partly reflect a greater willingness to report sensory differences, something that culturally women may feel more permitted to do. Still, these patterns are enough to suggest that the brain's perceptual boundaries may be more flexible and more diverse than we ever imagined. Now, I just want to hop in here and reiterate, because I know what some of you might be thinking. Surely this isn't real. Surely this is all a hallucination or a dream leaking into waking life. But no, that's the key distinction here. Synesthesia is not a disorder, it's not a hallucination, and it's definitely not imagined. Unlike hallucinations, which are often intrusive, unpredictable, and disconnected from reality, synesthetic experiences are stable, reliable, and context-bound. A synesthete doesn't believe the color is actually there in the air. They know it isn't, but the experience is still very real to them. It's internal, yet vivid. and always consistent. A C sharp will always, for example, glow green. The letter A may be always red and angular. These aren't things that they've chosen, they're things that their brain simply does. And actually, it's not a burden. In fact, it's often a gift. Many synesthetes report enhanced memory, particularly for numbers, words, or musical passages. The color or shape or spatial layout, it becomes an extra memory cue, like a personal system of mental post-it notes. Some researchers even believe that synesthesia may be part of what makes certain people more imaginative or creatively inclined, because they're constantly moving between sensory dimensions, blending the boundaries of experience. But beyond memory, there's something else, something harder to quantify but easy to feel. Many synesthetes describe their perceptions as deeply emotional, as intimate and beautiful. For some, it's even spiritual. So, what's actually happening in the brain when synesthesia occurs? How does a sound become a color, a number become a shape, or even a day of the week suddenly glow with texture or emotion? For something that feels so surreal, the answer lies in something very real: the neural wiring of the brain itself. Over the past few decades, neuroscientists have been trying to untangle the mystery of synesthesia, but what they've found suggests that synesthesia isn't just poetic perception, it's actually deeply biological. And to understand it, we need to explore two of the leading theories that try to explain why this sensory blending happens. So the first is called the cross-activation theory, and it was proposed by neuroscientist Dr. Villayanur Ramachandran that I mentioned previously and Dr. Edward Hubbard in the early 2000s, and it's based on a simple but profound idea, that in people with synesthesia, certain areas of the brain have more structural connectivity, meaning that regions responsible for different senses are more physically intertwined. Let's take grapheme color synesthesia as an example, and this is where someone sees letters or numbers as specific colors. In the brain, there's a region in the fusiform gyrus called the visual word form area, and this is the part of your brain that processes letters and numbers. And right next to it, just a few millimeters away, is the V4 region, which is responsible for processing color. And in most people, these areas are relatively distinct. But in synesthetes, Ramachandran and Hubbard suggest that there might be extra neural connections between these neighboring areas. So when you activate one, say you see the number 5, the adjacent color processing area lights up too, triggering a simultaneous perception of red or green or whatever color that synesthete associates with the number 5. And what's fascinating is that this theory is supported by neuroimaging studies. Functional MRI scans, or fMRI, shows that in synesthetic brains, regions of the brain that wouldn't normally activate in response to particular stimulus do light up. So for example, in chromesthesia, where sound triggers color, auditory stimuli have been shown to activate not only the auditory cortex, but also the visual association cortex, even when the person isn't consciously imagining colors. In one study, researchers used fMRI to scan the brains of chromesthetic synesthetes while they listened to sounds, and they found significant activation in the V4 color region, which is the same region responsible for real visual color perception. And this confirmed that the color experience in synesthesia isn't imagined or metaphorical. It's tied to genuine activity in the visual processing system. In other words, the brain is seeing, even if your eyes are not. The second major explanation is called the disinhibited feedback theory, and this takes a slightly different approach. Instead of suggesting that synesthetes have extra physical connections, this theory proposes that all of us already have the potential for these cross-sensory connections, but in most people, they're inhibited or filtered out by the brain. So think of it like a mixing desk in a studio with sliders that turn certain connections up or down. In synesthetes, the sliders for cross-sensory feedback are turned all the way up, either due to genetics, development, or even temporary changes in neurochemistry. And this theory explains why some people report temporary synesthetic experiences under the influence of psychedelics like LSD. In these altered states, the normal boundaries between sensory systems seem to dissolve. Sound takes on color, touch becomes music, and vision starts to ripple with feeling. The disinhibited feedback theory suggests that synesthesia may not be an all or nothing trait, but rather a continuum of perceptual overlap, with synesthetes simply sitting closer to that one end of the spectrum. So both theories, cross-activation and disinhibited feedback, may be true, and they may work together. One emphasizes the brain's structure, and the other its chemistry and regulation. But they both point to the same conclusion, that synesthesia is not just a quirky sensory party trick. It's a reflection of how flexible, creative, and interconnected the brain really is. And it isn't just a theory. For some, the overlap between synesthesia, emotion, and sensory intensity is daily life. Now, I want to introduce you to Janet. She's a DJ, producer, and synesthete who speaks about the moment she first realized her perception was different, how music triggers vivid visuals and deep feelings, and how psychedelics amplified and ultimately overwhelmed that inner world.
So when did I first realize that something was different? I remember vividly. It's actually one of the first memories I have of being in the same time and space. Like, I remember where I was. I remember what was happening. And I was probably about 6 years old. I was sitting in a car with my brother. We had just moved from Hawaii to California, and my parents were inside this little office. We were trying to find a new place to live. I don't remember exactly what was going on, but my parents left my brother and I in a car, and we were listening to the radio, and I remember the Steve Miller Band's Fly Like an Eagle came on, and the intro part the intro has like these sweeping and phasing synthesizers, and like it's just very trippy and very strange. And then they build into this crescendo, and then they drop into the musical part of the song, and it was just I just saw flashes of color, and it was so strange. It was the oddest, most beautiful thing I've ever had happen to me in my youth. And and I asked my brother, I said, what did you see when that song came on? And he told me that people aren't supposed to see music. And that's kind of when I realized that I was experiencing something different than other people. So what does my experience look and feel like to me? Well, I have both auditory, visual, and spatial sequence synesthesia, and I also have some other things happening. Like if I see someone stub their toe, I will feel it. I don't know if that's part of synesthesia, but I mean, I think it's all kind of related. But so the spatial sequence synesthesia, I visualize months on a clock, but they're backwards. So it's like my years are counterclockwise with like November at the number 1 position, December at 12 o'clock, March at 9, and June at like the 6th position. It's the way I've always seen time and years. And as I mentioned, sound, I see sound represented by flashes of color. And some sounds are accompanied by light and a physical sensation as well. Like I easily get goosebumps. I can listen to a song and just feel overwhelmed by the emotive component of the song and just start crying. It all depends, but most of the time I see colors and visual light and light flashes when music happens, and like the different parts of the sound, the different parts of the song. I'll see like the chain, like when the chorus is going, it'll be a different color as the verses of the song, if that makes sense. And like a pleasant sound will be like a swirl of pastel colors, and like I kind of get this euphoric feeling, and like a pleasant drone, like like in ambient music, and just mellow kind of meditative stuff. But like, and then conversely, if I'm in in a restaurant and a small child starts screaming, I will feel pain. Nothing against crying babies, but they're very painful for me to be around. And then that sound will be like accompanied by like jagged patterns in my mind and dark colors. So that's basically what's going on. So the next question, give some examples or what is associated with what. And it says, and basically pleasant sounds are usually associated with flashes of white light or like light pastel colors, and they're constantly changing colors. It's not like one thing is green and one thing is blue. It's just like this gradient that just keeps moving in color. And, like discordant sounds, again, like, two people playing or someone's playing two adjacent notes or two people are singing out of harmony, someone singing out of key. Those are like jagged like splashes of color, but they're like, I don't know, they're a more a dark color, and the pattern that I see is kind of like a sawtooth. I guess like a sawtooth. It's edgy and it's not a smooth splash of color like with nice music and beautiful music. Anyways, so the next question is, speak about music in particular. What does my experience look like, and how does it impact my day-to-day relationship with music? So I am a recording artist. I'm a DJ producer, and I'm constantly trying to make sounds that like, move people, stimulate emotions, but most importantly, that starts with me. So I'm trying to create sounds that I see those beautiful visual patterns alongside it. And, as a music enthusiast, the same is true. I'm always looking for music that motivates me, it makes me feel good, and also helps me focus and concentrate. I cannot really work. I cannot really function without a beat going in the background or without some kind of music playing. It doesn't have to be loud. It just needs to be present. And I'm always looking for new genres, new types of music that will spark my interest. Because if I listen to something and I hear it over and over, I know what's going to happen. And that kind of bores my mind, I guess. And then, so I'm always into the new genres of music. And right now I'm really into South African Afro tech, like 3-step and like a type of techno out of Africa. And it's usually like really moving and pleasant, and it makes me so happy. And that's what I'm really into right now. Okay, and then the last question, speak about my previous experience with psychoactive substances and my stance today. I love this question. Like most artists, I've dabbled with substances. I particularly liked psilocybin over LSD, because with mushrooms, it was kind of in and out of your system really quickly. You kind of knew what you were in for. Well, and then and oh my gosh, the visual effects of synesthesia are so heightened, and also sometimes the feelings, like like if you hear like a cymbal crash, like I will feel it in my skin. I will feel those bass notes. Even if it's not that loud, even if it's in headphones, I will feel like a subwoofer is under my desk. It absolutely enhances the psychedelic experience. But I've realized that there's this heavy emotional component, because like I said, it's not just what I see and what I feel. It's like it is my mind, and so I kind of stay away from psilocybin and drugs like that these days, because I like to keep my life on an even keel. So no longer do I kind of put my mind through that, because there's an emotional toll, and it's heavy. I found myself like listening to music and then like curled up in a ball crying, even if I was okay. Like it just, I don't know, it just confuses the heck out of my brain.
And that brings us to another fascinating layer of this story, the link between synesthesia and creativity. Numerous studies have shown that synesthetes are more likely to work in creative fields, particularly in music, visual arts, design, and literature. One large-scale survey found that synesthetes were significantly more likely to engage in artistic practices and also to self-identify as creative. This makes sense when you consider that synesthesia literally adds a layer of sensory metaphor to everyday experience. And for people like Janet, if sound has shape and words have color, your world becomes a living canvas. Creative expression isn't just possible, it's almost inevitable. And for musicians, especially, synesthesia can act as a kind of internal guide or aesthetic compass. They might compose in a way that feels right visually. Ultimately, the science of synesthesia doesn't just help us understand those who experience it. It challenges the way all of us think about perception. It reminds us that the senses aren't locked in separate categories. They blend into each other, they collaborate, they build bridges to create meaning. And in the case of synesthetes, those bridges just happen to be lit up in different colors. So we've looked at how synesthesia works in the brain, the theories, the wiring, and the science, but what does it actually feel like? What is it like to live in a world where music isn't just something you hear, but it's something you see, feel, taste, or even become? In fact, one of the most consistent reports from chromesthetic synesthetes, so those who see color when they hear sound, is that synesthesia acts as an amplifier for musical feeling. It heightens the emotional impact of music, making songs feel deeper, more brighter, and maybe even physically uncomfortable. This isn't just about color, though, it's about a kind of full-body attunement to music. A song doesn't just affect them, it actually inhabits them. And for many synesthetes, these experiences aren't just sensory, but deeply emotional, because when music shows up in more than one modality, when it touches your ears and your inner eye, it doesn't just sound good, it feels profound. The colors might shift depending on the mood of the song. Maybe a melancholic track can darken into deep blues and grays, while an upbeat tune dances with yellow and sparks bouncing shapes. In that way, synesthesia becomes not just a sensory overlay, but an emotional amplifier, intensifying the highs, deepening the lows, and making every musical journey a little more immersive. Psychologically, this makes a lot of sense. In music psychology, there's a framework known as Breck-Femmer. If you're a regular here on the Sound Mind, you'll know its weight, but it's a model that outlines 8 different mechanisms through which music induces emotion. And among them are things like emotional contagion, musical expectancy, and visual imagery. So with visual imagery, the connection is clear. Many synesthetes involuntarily generate vivid visual scenes or colors when they hear music. And the imagery isn't just imagined or summoned, it just arrives. It's spontaneous, detailed, and consistent over time. Emotional contagion, on the other hand, it refers to the process by which we catch the emotion of the music that we're listening to. It's the way that a sad song can make us feel melancholic, or an upbeat rhythm can make us feel excited. For synesthetes, this process seems to be intensified. Because the emotional tone of a song is often mirrored or even magnified by its synesthetic effects. A major chord might sparkle yellow, while a dissonant clash might create uncomfortable, spiky visuals or even a physical sensation. This layering of feeling, both auditory and visual, makes musical emotion feel more immersive, more personal, and more inevitable. But synesthesia doesn't just shape how music is heard, it can guide how it's felt and even how it's moved to. For some, synesthetic perception becomes a powerful tool in creative or physical practices. I actually received a note from a spinning instructor who uses her synesthesia to design immersive workouts where color, music, and motion come together as one. Here's her telling her story.
Music is a big part of my life. I think I just have an innate skill of musicality, And it was developed when I learned to play my clarinet um, and did instruments in high school and then like the first couple years in college. Uh, it's just always has been just an instant, I know what's going to happen next kind of thing, even down to the count when I cue in indoor cycling. Music really triggers my emotions and it helps me through the day to day. It relieves stress. Um, at one point, I was dealing with depression, and the only thing I would want to listen to is down tempo music. And it was just a cool, blue, releasing type of feeling. And it's something that I really can't describe, but it was very, very relieving to listen to it. So I listened to it almost all day. Now it's better, and I use music as a tool to give myself confidence. Be patient. It's just that it's non illegal performance enhancing kind of drug, and people don't realize it. So yeah, I don't really associate colors with artists, but their artist styles really do repeat the same color. So as if Lady Gaga, she has finite beats and big finite beats. She's like, there it is, and it goes away and comes back. So that's very finite, like hip hop. So hip hop and Lady Gaga are more like Red, just that urgency and like you're gonna miss it, you're gonna miss it. So that's what I think about Lady Gaga and hip hop. Whereas Dua Lipa has this mid energy, central mid energy, and that's I'm usually turning on purple. That's what I feel with purple, and I guess that's along with um, like Prince, and that's really funny because he does a lot of purple, and it's just that's where I see it. Also, I think Billie Eilish is green because she does sing through her heart. And I believe I connect a lot of these colors now these days because I'm learning about the heart, the chakras. And these colors are starting to transform into how I feel. And it connects to chakras and stuff like that. For example, Adore You from Fred Again is definitely a green color. It makes you happy. It makes you feel like someone loves you. And so heart chakra, green. Um, Yellows are just like anything, a song that just kind of like unexpectedly just gives you energy. So, like a burst of energy. So, um, for some reason, I would do that, with a song like that if we have to do intervals or something. People think Red is, an interval type song, but no. So it's a lighthearted burst of energy. So I would say I can't think of any songs that would relate to that. That's more like a across the board. We always have someone has a song like that. How I use it in my spin classes or indoor cycling classes is that I create the colors to help create different levels of energy and emotion. My cycle classes are not high energy the whole time. You got to get your mind a break, give your mind a break. You got to give your body a break. You got to give your heart a break. So a lot of times I have a buildup and then blue color, which will be, at active recovery mentally and physically. And then I roll back up with a song that wakes you up a little bit. That'll probably be a green or purple. And then hit it with a red or a yellow kind of song. As usually those are like the finite beats, the big drops, and the urgency. So I don't know. That's just, and then when I cool down, it comes down to a blues song, which is soothing and takes away that vibration of the class. Uh, yeah, that's just how it goes for me. I guess it's kind of strange because sometimes I would say in class, oh, this is a green song. and they looking at me with blank stares, and I'm like, oh, maybe they're just tired. Now I'm thinking, hey, maybe that's just me, but that's okay. I like it. So it's really interesting. I'll sometimes change it and realize, the vibe. So
These cross-sensory reactions don't just influence how music is experienced, they can also influence how it's created. Many musicians with synesthesia say that their perceptions guide their compositional directions. A chord progression that feels too orange might be altered to something more blue. A song might feel incomplete if the colors don't resolve harmoniously by the end. These decisions aren't about musical theory or technical rules. They're about aligning the music with a kind of synesthetic aesthetic logic. Take Pharrell Williams, for example. He's spoken openly about how every chord he hears has a color. He once said that he chooses harmonies based on not just how they sound, but on what color combinations they produce in his mind, just like choosing a palette for a painting. In a lot of ways, synesthesia doesn't just enhance music. It becomes a kind of creative compass. It offers artists another dimension through which to explore emotion, tension, beauty, and meaning. And for listeners who have synesthesia, musical preference may be shaped not only by genre or lyrics, but how a song looks, feels, or moves inside them, even how it tastes, right? They might be drawn to music that evokes warm, saturated colors, or they might avoid music that tastes a certain way, just like we heard earlier. And it's not just about aesthetics. For many, synesthesia connects them more intimately to music, not just as entertainment, but as an emotional lifeline. Songs become places, chords become colors that hold memories. It's the kind of encoded world where music is the key to unlocking this entire multisensory language of experience. Now, while some people notice synesthesia early in childhood, others don't realize what they've been experiencing until much later, sometimes decades later. So, Matt is a music educator and a performer who was diagnosed with autism and ADHD as an adult. He always experienced music and color through flowing auras and three-dimensional space, but he never fully had a name for it, and I was so touched hearing his story. So here it is.
So, hi, my name is Matt. I'm 48 years old, late diagnosed autistic with ADHD and dyslexia. I've officially been diagnosed now for about the last 4 years. Formerly trained through university as a music educator, taught public school as a band director, and still an avid part-time musician, kind of freelance, predominantly on the brass side of the instrument family. But the whole family is pretty heavily involved in music instrumentally. So I recently learned of synesthesia through your Instagram account, and several others just kind of stumbled across it. It was kind of weird. I had always been able to hear color and visualize it in my head, like auras, almost kind of like a flowing aura, or sometimes because I'm dyslexic, I can see in 3 dimension. And so I never knew what it was, and nobody could ever explain it to me. And I just stumbled across it, and I went, wow, okay. And it's one of those things where I just never knew what it was, and I always thought it was just my imagination, and come to find out it's what it is, and that it's exclusive and individualistic to each person. And no two people are exactly the same, obviously. I've never met anybody who sees color the same way I do. But to answer your question pertaining to the 7-tone, like I explained in my post, to me, the 7-tone, never is the same color because it's always the leading tone up to 8. I see it in the scale or the harmonic series. And so because of that, it's never the same color, but it's always got a shimmer to it because it's that leading tone up. It wants to resolve to that 8 tone. And depending upon the harmonic structure, the orchestration, and stuff like that, because I'm always seeing music as it's being performed or as I'm listening to it in totality. I can't just pick out one line. It's hard for me to do. That leading tone, even when it's built into a bigger chord, always just kind of shimmers. And you can make it brighter or you can make it darker based off of additional chords within that structure. But it's always got that shimmer to it. It's just got like a sparkle to it. That's all. The only way I can explain it. So, but yeah, no, it's like I said, for me, synesthesia. It's my kids make fun of me because they always think I'm taking a nap when I listen to music or when I sit and listen to a live performance, and it's not because I'm trying to sleep, but I close my eyes and it helps me hear the colors. And it's amazing. I was blessed with the ability to have my oldest two were able to participate and still participate in an incredible high school wind ensemble program that just absolutely beautiful music. And then still being able to just go and listen to professional groups, and I just sit and I just zone everything out, and it's awesome. It's hard to replicate not being live, but it's still doable. But I wouldn't change it for the world. It's always auras.
And hearing about experiences like this, it really makes you wonder, maybe synesthesia isn't so different from how the rest of us experience music after all. Maybe we're all just on this spectrum of musical perception, with synesthetes sitting at the edge, showing us what's possible when the senses don't follow the rules. Because whether or not we see colour when we hear sound, music is never just heard. At least, I think. It's always felt, it's seen. It moves us, literally and figuratively. So maybe synesthesia is simply a more vivid expression of something universal. The fact that music doesn't just enter our ears, it transforms our entire inner world. So, after everything we've explored, the science, the stories, the sensory magic, what does synesthesia really tell us? At its core, I think that synesthesia reminds us that music has never been just about sound. It's not flat, it's not linear. It moves through us in ways that we often fully don't understand. Even for those of us who don't have synesthesia, music can conjure colour, evoke movement, stir memories, and unlock emotion. We might not see literal colours, but the language of music is already multisensory. We just don't always notice just how much. That's what makes synesthesia so fascinating to me. It's not some alien condition or a rare neurological glitch. It's a kind of living metaphor, a spotlight on the way that all of us experience the world, whether consciously or not. In a way, synesthetes are just tuning into something that exists beneath the surface of everyday perception. The fact that our senses are not separate lanes on a motorway. They're threads in the same woven fabric, and when those threads cross, creativity blooms. Think about it. When we say a piece of music is moving, we're not just talking about tempo. We mean it shifts something inside of us. When we describe a beat as dark or a voice as bright, we're tapping into the same instinct that synesthetes live with every single day, the instinct to make meaning across senses. And synesthesia just simply turns the volume up on that instinct, and in doing so, it offers us a glimpse of what's possible when we stop separating things that were never meant to be divided. Creativity, after all, it thrives in the in-between, in the blending, in the spaces where colour meets sound, rhythm meets emotion, and where perception becomes this poetry. Synesthesia doesn't just make art, it is art. It's the brain painting with its own internal palette, composing with sensations, and it's almost like choreographing with memory. I just think it's such a amazing concept, and I would love to experience it for a day, honestly. So maybe the question isn't, is synesthesia a superpower? But maybe a better question is, what if this is just another way of being human? Because the more we learn about the brain, the more we realize that neurodiversity, this beautiful spectrum of perception, isn't a deviation, it's a feature. It's a reminder that there's no single way to feel music and no universal way to see the world. Some of us hear colour, some of us see or taste sound, some of us simply feel it all at once, and maybe that's the real power of synesthesia. Not that it makes music more colourful, but that it shows us how connected everything already is. But that's all I have for today's episode. This has been an amazing one, and thank you so much for joining me today on The Sound Mind. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate or review on wherever you're listening and share it with someone who loves music just as much as you do. Do you know any synesthetes in your life? Maybe you should go out and find one. Maybe it's just something that they don't talk about because they might be afraid of being judged or being thought to lie about their experience. But try and open up that conversation with people around you. Don't forget to follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, come and say hi over on Instagram and on Threads at The Sound Mind Talks. That's how I meet so many of you amazing people. That's how I gather listener stories for these episodes. So if you want to be part of maybe a future episode, come and say hi over there. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on The Sound Mind.